I grew up in a town nobody remembers, and maybe that's the point, because we were never supposed to be remembered. The town wasn't even on maps past 1975. Just a smear of green where our streets and homes should have been, but I can tell you exactly where it was because it's still there, hidden under something you'll never see unless it wants you to. An orchard that doesn't belong to the world you and I live in. It belongs to something else, something patient, something that eats years the way you and I eat fruit. And I know that because it took mine, it took my mother's, it took nearly everyone's. But somehow I'm still here, stuck at 27 even though I should be 70 by now. And no matter how many mirrors I stare into, I can't explain why my skin hasn't aged. Only my memory has, stretched thin and rotted at the edges, filled with holes I can never patch. And all those holes point back to the orchard. Always the orchard. Rows upon rows of trees planted long before any of us were born. Their branches twisting into shapes that almost looked like arms. Their roots breaking through basements and sewers, crawling into our homes until everyone in town swore they could hear them moving at night, whispering, groaning, like the whole place was alive and hungry. The strangest part was the fruit, because it wasn't apples or pears or anything you'd recognize. It looked different depending on who was looking. To some kids, they looked like bright red apples. To others, they looked like pale pears. To me, they were always glassy orbs that shimmered like oil. Hard to the touch, humming faintly when you pressed your ear against them. And the first time I bit into one, I lost 3 years. I didn't know it at the time. I thought I'd just taken a nap in the orchard, a nap that lasted a couple hours. But when I got home, my mother was crying. My little sister was taller than me. My bed sheets had been changed, and everyone kept asking where I'd been for 3 years. I laughed at first, thought it was a prank, but when I looked in the mirror, nothing about me had changed. Not my hair, not my teeth, not the scar on my arm from climbing the fence at school. And that's when I realized the orchard hadn't let me sleep. It had swallowed the time inside me, like siphoning water from a glass. The years gone, but the body untouched. And that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came later when more kids started eating the fruit. Some lost days, some lost decades. One girl disappeared for 50 years, only to come back screaming, clawing at her own face. Because she hadn't just lost time, she'd lived it. Trapped somewhere she couldn't explain, somewhere where the sky was wrong and the ground pulsed like skin. She kept whispering about the mouth, about rows of teeth behind the trees, but nobody listened until she died, aged into dust overnight. I think that was the orchard's warning, its way of telling us we weren't supposed to steal back what it devoured. And now I understand the truth. The orchard doesn't just eat time, it trades it, uses it, repurposes it into something we never see until it's too late. And I think I finally started to see what it's building with all the years it's stolen. Because lately, when I stand at the edge of the rows, if I stare long enough, the branches start arranging themselves into shapes I almost recognize. Silhouettes of people. Their mouths open in silent screams, their arms stretched wide as though begging me to run. And sometimes, when I blink, they're closer, row after row of figures made of bark and bone, frozen mid-movement. And I think they're not trees at all. I think they're us, every one of us who's ever eaten the fruit, planted back into the soil, grown tall and waiting for the next season, the next harvest. And the orchard is patient. It can wait forever, but I can't. Because the fruit is calling me again. I can hear the low hum through my walls at night. And every time I close my eyes, I wake up with a seed in my mouth, wet and pulsing, like it's daring me to swallow. After the first time it took my years, I swore I'd never go back. But you can't avoid something that's already inside you, and the orchard doesn't let go once it's chosen you. That much I learned quickly. It followed me home in ways I didn't understand. It started with the seeds. Tiny hard things I'd find under my tongue every morning, bitter and sharp, spitting them out into the sink, only to find more the next day. My mother never believed me. She thought I was hiding something, sneaking off, maybe drinking or stealing. But I knew she saw the orchard in her dreams too, because I'd hear her whispering at night, mumbling to someone, begging for something back. The walls in our house felt thinner after that, like every sound carried through them, and most nights I could hear branches scratching on the roof, even though there were no trees near enough to touch it. And And one night when I looked outside, I swore I saw the orchard stretching right up to the porch. Rows of twisting black shapes where the road should have been. It was like the world was folding in on itself. Or maybe the orchard was spreading, and in the morning, everything would look normal again. But I knew it wasn't a dream, because the smell of the fruit clung to my clothes, sour and sweet like rot. I wasn't the only one. Kids at school started changing too. One boy came back after summer vacation with hair white as bone. Though he still had the face of a 10-year-old, a girl in my class stopped aging altogether, repeating the same grade for years, while her younger siblings passed her by. No one dared talk about it. No one dared say the word orchard. But the silence was worse than any confession. It meant we all knew and we all agreed to pretend. But you can't ignore it when people vanish. When houses go empty overnight, doors left wide open, meals half-eaten on the table, whole families disappearing as if they'd stepped between the rows and never found their way out. My mother called it the thinning. She said it ran in bloodlines, that some families were chosen to feed it more than others. And she cried when she told me she'd hoped marrying my father would dilute the curse. But blood is stubborn, it remembers. It returns to the soil it came from. And the orchard wanted me more than anyone. The second time it took me was worse, because I wasn't even inside the orchard when it happened. I was walking home from school when the world bent sideways. The sky rippled like heat waves. The ground melted in the mud. And before I knew it, I was standing between the rows again, even though the orchard should have been miles away. The trees loomed taller than before, their fruit heavier, pulsing like hearts on branches, humming so loud it rattled my teeth. And when I tried to turn around, the rows shifted, stretching endlessly in every direction. I knew then that you didn't enter the orchard, it entered you. It unfolded inside your life until every road led back to it. I tried not to touch the fruit, I really did. But the hum grew stronger until it was inside my skull, vibrating behind my eyes, and I blacked out. When I woke, I was lying on the floor of my bedroom, my clock blinking an error code, and outside the window it was snowing, even though it had been August just hours before. I ran downstairs to find my mother older, her hair streaked with gray, her hands trembling as she reached for me. She whispered my name like she didn't believe I was real, and I realized it had happened again. This time it wasn't years, it was decades. 27 years gone in a blink. My little sister had children of her own now. Her kids looked older than me, and yet my face was the same, my skin the same. The orchard had cheated me again, and all I could do was collapse and scream into the carpet. People say grief is heavy, but this was different. It was weightless. Like I had nothing left to hold on to, like time itself had been scooped out of me. Me, leaving a hollow thing where a life should have been. And that's when I saw him for the first time, at the edge of the orchard. A figure too tall, his head brushing the branches, his arms long and crooked, his body woven from bark and shadows. He stood perfectly still, but his face, or what should have been his face, wasn't there. It was a hole, a black hollow pulling everything toward it. The branches bent in his direction as if bowing, and I swear the fruit pulsed in rhythm with his breathing. I couldn't move, couldn't blink, until he lifted one hand and pointed at me, just once, and then everything snapped back. I was in my room again, the snow gone, the clock still blinking, but the seed under my tongue that night was warm, alive, squirming like it had veins of its own, and when I spat it into the sink, I swear I heard it whisper my name. I thought maybe if I ignored it long enough, it would go away. That if I stopped saying its name and stopped thinking about the rows, I could stitch my life back together. But you can't escape something that grows inside you. And that's what the orchard does. It doesn't just exist out there beyond the hills. It crawls into your blood. It curls its roots into your dreams until you can't tell where you end and it begins. And even though I tried to pretend, even though I tried to keep my head down and walk straight home every day, the orchard found me anyway. Little pieces of it seeping through the cracks of my world. Shadows of branches stretching across my walls when no trees stood nearby. The taste of fruit in my mouth when I hadn't eaten anything all day. And sometimes worse than all of it, voices that weren't quite voices, more like the sound of leaves whispering against one another, echoing inside my chest until I couldn't tell if I was breathing or if something else was. My mother had gotten sick by then. Old age had chewed her down to something fragile and small, though it hadn't been that long for me, not really. Not when the orchard kept stealing the years. She told me she'd seen him too. The faceless figure, the thing that stood at the edge of the rows with arms like crooked branches and a body that bent the air around it. She said she first saw him when she was a little girl, and he never left. He always waited, always pointed. She told me that once he pointed, he never stopped. No matter how far you ran, you could go across the country, across the ocean, and he'd still be there, standing at the tree line, waiting, his finger leveled at you like a curse. And she cried when she admitted she'd seen him outside our house too, standing in the yard in the rain, staring at my window while I slept. She said she prayed every night, but prayer only makes it worse. The orchard doesn't answer to God. It doesn't answer to anything. It just feeds. I tried to fight it in my own way. I dug into old records, newspapers, things most people in town didn't want to talk about, because everyone knew but no one dared speak. I found stories of families vanishing, of people aging overnight, of strangers wandering into town with no memory of who they were, sometimes speaking in words that didn't exist anymore. Old dialects, dead languages. One article from the 50s described a boy who stumbled out of the orchard barefoot, carrying a fruit in his hands, his hair white, his eyes black like the seeds. He swore it had only been an afternoon, but by the time they compared his fingerprints to old school files, 50 years had passed, his parents were dead, his siblings had grandchildren older than him. They locked him away in a hospital, but the orchard followed him inside, branches bursting through the tiles, fruit rotting on the floors, nurses whispering in their sleep until their mouths bled seeds. And within a month, the boy was gone again, pulled back between the rows, not a trace left except the smell of soil. The deeper I dug, the more it tangled around me. Sometimes I'd lose whole hours. Without realizing, I'd blink and the sun would have shifted halfway across the sky. My hands stained with dirt I couldn't explain. And one evening I woke to find myself standing barefoot on the highway miles outside of town, staring into the dark horizon, and in the distance I could hear the hum of the fruit again, low and steady like a heartbeat. I knew then that it was only a matter of time before it pulled me back, and I started to wonder if maybe it already had, if maybe all of this was just another row in the orchard, and I hadn't even noticed the shift, like maybe my whole life was just me wandering between trees I couldn't see. It wasn't until the night my mother died that I realized the orchard takes more than time. It takes people too. Not just their years, but their flesh, their voices, their souls. I found her in her bed, her body shriveled like she'd been drained, her mouth filled with seeds, dozens of them spilling onto the pillow, and her eyes were missing, two dark hollows that wept soil instead of tears. And when I reached for her hand, it crumbled into ash, scattering across the sheets like dust. I wanted to scream, but the orchard had stolen even that from me. The sound caught in my throat, my jaw locked, and when I looked up, I saw him again, standing in the doorway, taller than before, bent at the ceiling, his arms stretched forward, pointing at me, always pointing, his faceless head tilting just slightly, as if listening to the silence of my grief. And in the reflection of the window behind him, I could see the rows, endless and waiting, swaying gently as though breathing. And for the first time, I understood that he wasn't just pointing, he was beckoning, calling me forward like I belonged to him, like I always had. That night I ran. I don't even remember grabbing my shoes. I just ran until my chest burned and my throat tore raw. I ran until the houses thinned and the road bled into dirt, until the night closed around me and the orchard rose up on either side, rows upon rows swallowing the stars. And when I stopped to catch my breath, I realized I was already inside. The trees pressed close, their branches bending low to brush against my skin, the fruit glowing faintly in the dark, pulsing like lanterns, like organs. I heard voices again, louder now, clear enough to make out, whispering my name in overlapping tones, hundreds of them, each one familiar. My mother, my sister, my younger self, even voices I didn't recognize, all calling from somewhere deeper in the rows, telling me to keep walking, to come closer. and the ground was soft beneath my feet, damp with something that smelled metallic. And I realized I wasn't stepping on soil at all, but on layers of rotting fruit, mushy and warm, alive with something that writhed and wriggled beneath the surface. And no matter how much I wanted to turn back, the rows kept shifting, twisting, forcing me further in. That was when I saw the first body hanging. A man strung up between two branches, his arms stretched wide, his skin translucent, his veins black and bulging with seeds, the fruit growing directly out of him, his mouth open in a silent scream, his chest rising and falling even though his eyes had already rotted away. I staggered back only to find another behind me, then another, dozens of them. Whole families hanging from trees like grotesque fruit of their own, each one breathing shallowly, each one whispering in voices that weren't theirs anymore, voices that belonged to the orchard. And through the rows I could see him moving, the tall, faceless thing, his body shifting like wood, his limbs creaking, his hands still raised, always pointing, always claiming. And I realized with horror that maybe all of them had thought they could escape too, that maybe this orchard wasn't just a place but a trap, and all of us were just part of its harvest, waiting to ripen. I don't know how long I walked. I don't even know if walking is the right word anymore, because the rows moved under me. They carried me the way a river carries a body. I'd try to step back and the path would twist, pulling me deeper no matter which way I turned, and the more I struggled, the more the orchard seemed to notice, the branches closing in overhead, until the sky was nothing but a memory, and the whispers grew louder, clearer, not just my name anymore, but whole sentences, promises, warnings, threats, all tumbling over one another in a language that was almost mine, but bent, wrong, like someone had taken English, cracked it down the middle so the words leaked rot. Some of the voices begged me to stop, others begged me to keep going, and in the middle of them all there was one steady voice, deep and hollow, speaking without sound, a voice I felt in the bones of my skull, and it kept repeating the same phrase, "You are late, you are late, you are late." The fruit glowed brighter the deeper I went, each one pulsing in time with that phrase, with the rhythm of a clock that wasn't ticking but beating. And I realized the orchard didn't measure time the way we did. It measured it in blood, in breath, in years, stolen and traded like currency. When I touched one of the fruits, God help me, I couldn't stop myself. I felt every age at once, childhood and old age, layered like thin sheets of glass, shattering all at once until I didn't know if I was 10 years old or 70. My hands trembling and smooth all at once, my voice breaking like a boy's and rasping like a dying man's. I dropped the fruit and it split open against the ground, spilling not juice but a flood of black seeds that crawled like insects, burying themselves into the soil. And I realized that's all we were to the orchard, not people, not souls, just seeds waiting to be broken open, waiting to sprout into something it could use. I kept moving, I don't know if by choice or because choice was already gone, and the hanging bodies thinned out until the trees themselves began to look wrong, their barks splitting in patterns that looked like faces, faces I knew, my mother, my sister, my own reflection staring back at me from the grain, all of them whispering in unison now, whispering about how long they'd been waiting, about how late I was, about how the orchard had chosen me long before I was born. That's when I saw him again, the tall figure, not standing still this time, but walking between the rows, slow and deliberate, each step bending the trees toward him, his fingers still leveled at me, pointing even as he moved, his faceless head tilted in curiosity, like he was studying something fragile, something stupid. And when he reached a clearing, I realized what he was pointing to wasn't me at all. It was the ground. In the middle of the clearing, the soil wasn't black, it was white, pale and smooth like bone. And when I looked closer, I realized it wasn't soil at all, but a mass of skulls, thousands of them, half buried and packed so tightly they formed a floor, their hollow sockets staring upward in silent worship. And from the center of that field grew a single tree taller than all the rest, its branches stretching endlessly, its trunk pulsing as though alive, its roots breaking the skulls beneath it like brittle shells. The fruit hanging from it was unlike the others. It didn't glow faintly, but burned, each orb a miniature sun, each one humming with such force the air around them shimmered. I didn't want to go closer, but my legs betrayed me, carrying me forward, stepping across those skulls, hearing them crack and shift beneath my weight. And as I drew near, the tree's roots began to twitch, slithering across the surface until one of them coiled around my ankle. It wasn't like being grabbed by a hand, it was like being claimed by something older than hands, older than people. And as it tightened, I felt my pulse sinking with it, my heart no longer beating for me, but for the tree, every thud echoing through its roots, through its branches, until I wasn't sure if my blood belonged to me anymore. The figure stood across the clearing, pointing still, but I understood now that he wasn't pointing to the ground or the tree. He was pointing to me, to the place where I was supposed to stand, the place I had always been meant to stand. And when I looked up at the burning fruit, I saw faces inside them, pressed against the skin, screaming silently, dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands. And one of them was my mother, her hollow eyes begging, her mouth opening wider and wider until it split the fruit and seeds spilled down like rain. I screamed then, or I think I did. Though it didn't sound like me anymore, it sounded like the orchard itself, screaming through me, and the trees all around answered, their branches thrashing, their fruit trembling, and the skulls beneath me cracked open to reveal more seeds, endless seeds, spilling into the earth and burrowing deep. The faceless figure finally lowered his hand, and when he did, the great tree bent down, its branches curling around me like ribs, closing me in, and one of the burning fruits swung low enough to brush against my lips. I didn't want it, I swear I didn't, but the root around my ankle forced me upward, bent my head back, and the fruit split open against my mouth. It wasn't juice inside, it was years, raw and burning, flooding my throat, choking me. Every second I'd ever lived played backward and forward at once until I could see every mistake, every breath, every shadow of myself multiplied into infinity. And as it poured into me, I realized the orchard wasn't just eating time. It was replacing it, rewriting it, threading me into its rows like another branch, another piece of its endless cycle. My body stretched, my skin cracked, bark blooming from my veins, my bones groaning as roots pushed through them, anchoring me to the skulls below. I wasn't screaming anymore, I couldn't. My mouth was full of seeds, spilling down my chest, sprouting where they landed, and through the blur of pain and fire, I saw the truth. The orchard wasn't a place. It wasn't even the trees. The orchard was us. Every person it ever took, every year it ever stole, it wove them all into itself until nothing existed outside of it anymore. Not really, just endless rows of lives growing, rotting, feeding the next. The faceless figure wasn't its master. He was its shadow, its reflection. Maybe even just another piece of fruit pointing the way. And now I was part of it too. My mother, my sister, every voice I'd ever heard. They hadn't been calling for help, they'd been calling me home. I don't know if you can hear me still or if this voice is just another echo. The orchard lets slip between its branches, but if you can, if my words reach you in any way, I'm begging you, don't come looking. Don't follow the route. Don't let the whispers trick you into thinking you have a choice. Because the orchard isn't waiting for you. It already has you. Every time you lose an hour, every time you feel a day slip past too fast, that's it. Reaching, feeding, pulling you closer. And one day you'll look up and see him standing there too. Pointing, always pointing, and when you do, you'll understand. Because the orchard doesn't just eat time. It eats everything. And sooner or later, it eats you.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe for more horror tales.